They said the town was dead, poisoned, buried, and forgotten by time. But when a former FBI agent named Daniel Cross, haunted by PTSD, after a failed mission that cost his partner's life, wandered into the snow with his loyal dog, something began to stir beneath the silence. He wasn't searching for redemption, only a night of peace away from the memories that never let go. Yet God had other plans, because in the ruins of Black Hollow, he would uncover a truth buried for decades, and a miracle that would prove that even the most broken souls can still be chosen to heal others. Stay till the end. The final moment will leave you believing again. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. Snow drifted through the pale dawn over the Montana wilderness, whispering across a valley abandoned by both men and mercy. Ash River lay silent beneath its blanket of white, a graveyard of silver mines, hollowed homes, and ghosts that had forgotten their names. Daniel Cross tightened his grip on the steering wheel of the old gray Ford truck as it crawled along the snow-clogged road. 45, lean but broad-shouldered, with the tired posture of a man who had carried too many invisible weights. His dark blonde hair, streaked with gray near the temples, curled slightly under the hood of his worn jacket. A thin beard traced his jaw, neat, deliberate, like a man trying to control what little he could. His eyes, pale hazel and rimmed with exhaustion, scanned the horizon with a mixture of caution and resignation. He had once been an FBI field agent, the kind that made others trust the badge more than the man wearing it. But 3 years ago, a hostage operation in Phoenix had gone wrong. The explosion took the lives of 2 colleagues and left Daniel half buried under concrete, breathing dust and regret. When he crawled out, the world no longer sounded the same. Every thunderclap became a detonation, every siren a scream. They called it PTSD. Daniel called it the echo, the sound that refused to die even when everything else did. Beside him sat Rex, a 5-year-old German shepherd with a sable coat and deep amber eyes that burned with the intelligence of a soldier who had seen too much. Once trained for bomb detection, Rex bore a faint scar across his left hind leg, a reminder of an explosion he'd survived alongside Daniel. He was calm, loyal, and fiercely protective, a mirror to Daniel's silent grief. The truck groaned as it climbed the final hill. Through the windshield, a wooden sign emerged from the snowstorm. "Welcome to Black Hollow, founded 1893. Only the first half of the sign remained, the rest had been shredded by wind and time. Daniel slowed the truck to a halt, the tires crunching ice. Snow hissed against the windows. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring at the lifeless town sprawled below. Black Hollow looked like it had been swallowed by silence. The roof sagged under snow, the windows were hollow sockets, and the church steeple leaned sideways, its cross broken at the base. A lone windmill creaked faintly in the distance, its rusty blade slicing through the white air like a heartbeat that refused to quit. Rex let out a low growl, his ears twitching. "Easy," Daniel murmured, resting a gloved hand on the dog's neck. "If this place has ghosts, they've probably frozen solid by now." He parked near what might once have been a general store. The signboard read, "Miller's Goods," the paint long stripped away, leaving behind a faint ghost of letters. Daniel stepped out, his boots sinking into the snow. The cold bit through his coat, but he didn't flinch. He'd grown used to discomfort, the kind that wasn't in the body but in the soul. Inside the truck bed, he gathered what little he owned, a duffel bag, a portable heater, a canvas cot, and an old metal trunk filled with memories he never opened. He had sold his apartment, donated his suits, even left his badge on his desk, though sometimes he still felt its weight pressing against his chest at night. Rex bounded ahead, nose to the wind, leaving paw prints across the untouched snow. The sky above hung heavy with gray clouds, swollen with more snow to come. Daniel followed, his breath visible in the frigid air. The wind carried faint whispers, metal scraping, something shifting beneath the cold. He stopped, listening. Nothing, just the creak of the windmill turning once more. He muttered under his breath, "Perfect place to forget." The first building he entered was the town hall. Dust lay thick as frost. Faded posters clung to the walls. Community dance, March 1987. Beneath it, another read, "North Star Chemical, building tomorrow." He felt his jaw tighten. The stories he'd heard in town echoed back, something about a chemical leak that poisoned the water and drove everyone away overnight. No investigation, no closure, just a quiet cover-up buried under snow. He found an old desk in the corner, drawers stuck with ice. Inside was a child's mitten, small and red, frozen stiff. He held it a moment longer than he meant to, his throat tightening. "You shouldn't be here either," he whispered. When he returned to the truck, the storm had grown thicker. Snowflakes swirled like ashes. He decided to sleep in the old sawmill just north of town, its roof mostly intact, its walls sturdy enough to hold the wind at bay. Inside, the air smelled of pine and rust. He set down his cot, started the heater, and poured a small tin of coffee over the stove. The warmth spread slowly, reluctant to stay. Rex curled beside him, eyes half closed but alert. Daniel looked into the flames. For the first time in months, he felt no city noise, no hum of traffic, no echo of the past, only silence. He thought he might finally sleep, but the silence was deceptive. As night deepened, the heater flickered. The wood creaked with age. Somewhere outside, a faint sound echoed, metal striking metal, like a loose chain swaying in the wind. Rex lifted his head, ears perked. Daniel froze. He reached for the flashlight and switched it on, the beam slicing through the dark. The sound stopped. Only the whistle of the storm remained. He exhaled slowly and lowered the light. "Just the wind," he said softly. But even he didn't believe it. He lay back, staring at the ceiling through the dim light. His mind wandered to his partner Marcus, the one who had died in Phoenix, his last words echoing through the smoke. "Find a place where you can breathe again, Cross." "Guess this is it," Daniel whispered. "A place even the world forgot." Outside, the wind shifted, howling through the hollow streets. And for a moment, just a breath, he thought he heard footsteps crunching in the snow outside the sawmill, slow, deliberate, human. Rex stood, tail rigid, teeth bared toward the door. Daniel rose from the cot, pulse pounding, flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The beam hovered on the wooden door where someone, had left a faint handprint in the frost. Then the sound came again. One knock, then another, and just like that, the silence of Black Hollow broke. The knocks came again, firm but slow, muffled beneath the snowfall. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Rex stood alert beside him, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. For a long moment, Daniel didn't move. He'd been trained to handle far worse, yet something about this silence between knocks unsettled him more than any firefight ever had. He stepped forward and unlatched the door. A gust of snow swept in, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and smoke, and a woman's silhouette. She stood in the doorway, the storm swirling around her like a restless halo. Her rifle was slung casually across her shoulder, and her gloved hand gripped a lantern that threw a trembling circle of light across her face. She was tall, perhaps late 30s, with a lean, wiry frame hardened by cold winters and harder truths. Her hair, dark chestnut and streaked with gray near the temples, was pulled into a loose braid that brushed her scarf. Her eyes, sharp hazel green, had the steady look of someone who didn't scare easily. "Evening," she said, her voice calm, edged with the huskiness of someone who'd spent more nights talking to wind than people. "You picked a hell of a place to sleep." Daniel didn't answer at first. He was busy reading her stance, weight balanced, fingers relaxed, but eyes always measuring. Not a threat, but not harmless either. He nodded slightly. "Didn't realize it was taken." "It's not," she replied, stepping inside to escape the wind. "But it's not safe either. Roof will hold for now, but some of the walls are rotten. Town's been dead since '87. Locals call it cursed." Rex sniffed at her boots, tail low but curious. She glanced down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Well, hello there, soldier." The dog relaxed, his instinctive judgment given. That was enough for Daniel. "I'm Daniel Cross," he said quietly, extending a hand. "FBI, retired." "Retired?" she echoed with a dry chuckle. "That what they call it now?" She shook his hand firmly. "Elena Moore. My family used to own the farm up north, what's left of it." Her gloves were frayed, patched with leather, and the lines around her mouth deepened when she spoke, evidence of years spent surviving rather than living. Daniel gestured toward the small fire in the barrel. "You're welcome to warm up." "Appreciate it." She knelt, holding her hands to the heat. Steam rose from her coat as the ice melted, revealing a patched wool jacket and heavy boots caked in snow. "You new here?" "Bought the property last month. Figured it was quiet." Elena snorted softly. "Quiet, sure, but quiet can drive a man insane out here." Daniel gave a wry smile. "Already been there. Figured I'd give it another try." For a while, neither spoke. The wind outside beat against the tin roof, and the fire crackled softly. Elena watched him carefully, her gaze flicking between the duffel bags, the heater, and the military orderliness in the way his things were arranged. "You're not just hiding," she said finally. "You're running from something." Daniel didn't deny it. "A few ghosts. You?" Elena's eyes darkened. "Same." She stared into the fire as if searching for faces in the flames. "My husband worked for North Star Chemical back when they promised jobs. He was in the cleanup team when the leak happened. He didn't make it out." Her tone was steady, but her jaw tightened. "They said it was an accident. I say it was neglect. After that, people left. I stayed. Someone had to keep the land from disappearing completely." Daniel nodded slowly. "You don't seem the type to leave things unfinished." "Neither do you," she said, meeting his eyes. Something unspoken passed between them, recognition perhaps, or shared fatigue. Rex lay down beside them, his head resting on his paws, eyes half-lidded but ears twitching at every sound. Daniel reached out and rubbed the dog's neck. He used to find bombs. Now he just finds trouble. "Sounds like his owner," Elena replied, a flicker of humor in her tone. It faded quickly, replaced by a seriousness that cut through the warmth. "Listen, Cross, you might think you came here by choice, but this place doesn't draw people for no reason. Every soul who wanders into Black Hollow is chasing something, or being chased." Daniel leaned back, studying her. "Which one are you?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe both." Outside, the storm began to ease, and the wind carried a different sound, something hollow and rhythmic, faint but distinct. Daniel turned toward the noise. "You hear that?" Elena frowned, listening. "Under the snow? Yeah, it's coming from the old well near the church." Daniel grabbed his coat. "Let's take a look." She hesitated. "At night? You've got a death wish?" "Can't sleep anyway," he said, loading a flashlight into his pocket. "You coming or not?" With a muttered curse, she slung her rifle and followed him out into the snow. Rex trotted ahead, his dark coat dusted white, tail low but steady. The town was almost beautiful in its decay, moonlight glinting off shattered glass, snow clinging to warped porches and half-buried signs. The church's steeple loomed ahead, its bell long gone, the rope still swaying faintly as if moved by unseen hands. The well stood in the square, its stones rimmed with frost. The metallic echo sounded again, clink, clink, like something striking metal far below. Daniel aimed his flashlight down the shaft, revealing ice-covered walls descending into darkness. "There's something moving down there," he said quietly. Elena knelt beside him, squinting. Animals, maybe, or just the cold settling. Rex began to bark sharply, tail rigid, hackles raised. His paws dug into the snow as if to anchor himself. Daniel's instincts sharpened. "No, that's something else." The sound came again, louder this time. Then abruptly, silence. Daniel's breath fogged in the air. He turned to Elena, whose face had gone pale beneath the lamplight. "You've lived here long enough. Ever seen anyone near this place?" She shook her head slowly. "Not since the mine collapsed 20 years ago. No one comes near the well. They say it's where they dumped what was left of the chemicals." Daniel straightened. "Then why does it sound like something's trying to get out?" Before she could answer, a faint vibration rippled under their boots. Soft at first, then sharper, like ice cracking under pressure. The snow around the well trembled. Rex barked again. Circling, the rim. Daniel stepped back, flashlight fixed on the darkness below. Then it stopped. Everything stilled, the wind, the noise, even Rex's breathing. The valley fell into perfect, unnatural quiet. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "This place remembers." Daniel stared into the pit, heart pounding. He didn't know what he expected to see. An animal, machinery, maybe just echoes of his own nerves. But what he saw instead was movement. A faint, shifting shimmer beneath the ice. Not light, not reflection, something else entirely. He lowered the flashlight, jaw tightening. "Tomorrow," he said. "We dig." Elena exhaled shakily. "And if you find something you shouldn't?" Daniel looked back at her, snow collecting in his hair, his eyes cold but alive. "Then maybe it's time someone finally did." Behind them, the well let out one last sound, a slow, deliberate clink, as if agreeing. And under the snow, something echoed back. Morning broke cold and white, the kind of morning that swallowed sound. Snow covered everything in a seamless sheet, and the world looked remade, untouched, innocent, and lying. Daniel Cross stepped out of the sawmill with a shovel slung over his shoulder, the air biting sharp against his face. Frost clung to his beard, and his breath rose in quick clouds as he crossed toward the old well. Rex trotted beside him, ears pricked, every step measured. The silence that had haunted the night now seemed heavier, as if the valley itself were holding its breath. Elena Moore waited by the well, her rifle leaning against the stone rim. She wore the same patched wool jacket, dusted with frost, her braid pulled tighter today. Her eyes flicked toward Daniel as he approached. "You sure about this?" He nodded, his voice low. "Whatever's under there made noise. I need to know why." Elena handed him a crowbar she'd scavenged from a nearby shed. "Then, let's wake the ghosts." They worked in silence, chipping at the ice crust that sealed the top of the well. Each strike echoed faintly, swallowed by the cold air. After nearly an hour, the crowbar struck something hollow. Daniel crouched, brushing away shards of ice, revealing a layer of metal plating buried just below the stones. It wasn't part of the well's original structure. Someone had sealed it deliberately. Elena frowned. "That's not old construction. That's a cover." Daniel ran his glove along the edge, finding the seam where metal met stone. "Industrial steel," he murmured. "Probably installed after the leak." Rex barked once, the sound echoing down the valley. Daniel looked up, following the dog's gaze. A vehicle was approaching from the road, a white Jeep, its tires crunching through the snow. The engine's hum broke the quiet like a pulse returning to a dead body. The Jeep stopped a few yards away. The driver stepped out, pulling down her scarf. She was in her early 30s, slender, with auburn hair tied in a messy knot and cheeks flushed pink from the cold. A camera hung around her neck, and a leather satchel rested on one shoulder. She wore a denim jacket lined with fur, the kind favored by people who spent more time chasing stories than comfort. "Morning," she called out, smiling through her breath. "Didn't think anyone still lived here." Elena stiffened slightly, hand hovering near her rifle. Daniel straightened, eyes narrowing. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Lydia Cole," she said, approaching with careful confidence. "I'm a freelance photojournalist, working on a documentary about America's ghost towns. I've been tracking sites abandoned after industrial disasters. Someone at a diner in Helena said there was a man rebuilding Black Hollow. Thought I'd see for myself." Daniel exchanged a look with Elena. "You drove out here alone?" "Journalists are nosy by nature," Lydia replied lightly, then glanced toward the well. "What are you digging for? Treasure? Or trouble?" "Neither," Daniel said, brushing snow from his gloves. "Just answers." Lydia crouched beside the rim, peering down. "You know, if you're planning to dig into contaminated soil, you might want a mask, or a hazmat suit, or at least a bad life insurance policy." Her humor was disarming, and Daniel felt the edge of tension ease, just slightly. "You always this optimistic?" "Only before coffee," she said, flashing a grin. Her voice carried warmth even when teasing, a kind of resilience that came from surviving her own storms. Elena, still wary, asked, "You work alone?" "Usually," Lydia replied. "But I send updates to my editor, just in case I disappear in some haunted mining town." She snapped a photo of the well, the camera clicking softly in the cold. "Mind if I document this?" Daniel hesitated. "Depends what you plan to tell the world." "The truth," Lydia said simply, lowering her camera. "If there's still any left." For a moment, something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Recognition, maybe respect. "You're late to the party. The truth's been buried here for 40 years. "Then maybe it's time someone dug it up," she said, matching his gaze. They worked together for the rest of the morning, chipping at the frozen steel while Lydia took notes, her gloved fingers moving quickly despite the cold. She asked questions between breaths about the town, the accident, why Daniel came. He answered little, but she was persistent. "You talk like someone who's used to keeping secrets," she said at one point. Daniel paused his work, staring at the ground. "Some secrets are all a man has left." The wind picked up then, scattering snow into the air. Lydia studied him quietly. "You were FBI, weren't you?" Elena shot her a look. "How'd you—" "The stance," Lydia interrupted gently. "Shoulders back, eyes always tracking exits, and the way you don't flinch at noise, just measure it. I've interviewed enough veterans to recognize it." Daniel didn't confirm or deny. He simply kept working until the crowbar slipped into a seam, prying loose a rusted latch. With a screech, the metal cover shifted slightly, releasing a puff of cold, stale air from the darkness below. They all froze. Daniel leaned over the edge, flashlight in hand. The beam pierced the dark, illuminating a narrow tunnel beneath the well. Frost glittered on steel walls, and faint writing was visible near the base. "North Star Property. Keep sealed." Elena exhaled. God, they built a vault under the well. Lydia's voice was hushed with awe. "Or a tomb." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Help me clear it." For the next hour, they pried loose enough metal to reveal an opening wide enough for a man. The air that rose was thick, metallic, tinged with something sour, the kind of scent that stuck in Maury. Daniel tied a rope to the well frame and slung it over his shoulder. "You're not serious," Elena said sharply. "You don't even know what's down there." "That's exactly why I'm going," he replied. Lydia crouched beside him, adjusting her camera strap. "Then I'm going too." Daniel gave her a hard look. "This isn't a story you can walk away from." She met his gaze evenly. "Neither is yours." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel nodded once. "Fine. Stay behind me. Rex, guard the surface." The dog barked once, obedient. Daniel descended first, the rope creaking under his weight. The air grew colder with each step. Lydia followed, her camera light cutting thin beams through the frost. The tunnel opened into a small chamber lined with metal boxes, each stamped with serial numbers and company seals. On the far wall, someone had scrawled in faded paint, "For those who remember." Lydia whispered, "This isn't storage, it's a record." Daniel knelt beside a box, brushing away dust. Inside lay stacks of old photos and ledgers, brittle with age. Names, numbers, signatures, evidence of shipments, payouts, falsified safety reports. The truth, preserved in ice. He turned one page and froze. There was a photo of workers beside large chemical tanks, smiling for the camera. One of them was Elena's husband. He looked up slowly at Lydia. "They didn't just poison the town," he said. "They hid it under its own heart." Before Lydia could respond, the tunnel trembled slightly. A faint sound echoed above, Rex barking furiously, then the distant growl of an engine. Daniel's face hardened. "We've got company." Lydia turned off her light, her heartbeat quickening. "Who?" He looked toward the well's mouth where faint shadows crossed against the snow. "Someone who doesn't want this found." The echo of footsteps drew closer, and the cold seemed to thicken, pressing in. Daniel reached for his pistol out of instinct, though he hadn't drawn one in years. His breath came slow, controlled as the light above dimmed. Someone was covering the well, and then everything went dark. Darkness swallowed the air like water closing over a sinking ship. The sound above, the dull scrape of metal sealing the well, echoed once, twice, and then was gone. Daniel Cross froze, his pulse thudding slow but deliberate. The only light came from Lydia's small camera lamp, flickering weakly in the frost-thick air. The vault around them felt suddenly smaller, its walls breathing cold against their skin. Rex's barking above turned frantic, muffled by snow and distance. "Someone's closing the hatch," Lydia whispered. Her breath misted in the air, eyes wide beneath the pale glow. Daniel steadied himself, hand brushing the pistol at his hip. "Stay calm." He tilted his head, listening. "No gunfire, just movement. They don't want to kill us, yet." Lydia swallowed. "That's comforting." He crouched by the ladder leading upward, testing the rope. It was slack now. The upper end must have been pulled free. "They're sealing us in," he said quietly. "Whoever's up there knows exactly what we found." The two stood in silence. Daniel's mind moved with disciplined precision, the way it had in every raid, every ambush. Fear was just another variable. "We find another way out," he said. "Vaults like this always have maintenance tunnels." Lydia nodded, clutching her camera like a lifeline. "And if it doesn't, then we make one." He moved his flashlight across the chamber walls, tracing seams between steel plates until he found one panel slightly raised. The metal bore faint scratches, recent ones. "Someone's been down here before," he murmured. "Not decades ago. Weeks." Lydia's voice softened. "Elena's husband?" Daniel shook his head. "No. Someone still protecting what North Star buried." He pressed against the edge. The panel shifted, releasing a gust of air, sharp with ammonia and rust. "Found it." They crawled through a narrow passage lined with corroded pipes. The tunnel twisted downward before splitting in two. One path sloped toward the old mine shafts beneath the valley, the other curved up toward the mountainside. Daniel paused to listen. Above, faint vibrations rumbled like distant engines. "They're still out there," he said. "Probably waiting for us to suffocate." Lydia's tone was steady but tight. "You've got a talent for optimism." He managed a faint smile. "It's called preparation." They moved deeper, the air thick with dust and the weight of years. Lydia's camera clicked occasionally, documenting even now, her instinct as a storyteller stronger than her fear. She noticed inscriptions scratched along the walls, names, initials, fragments of prayers. "People hid down here," she murmured, "during the accident." Daniel brushed frost from one line. "Forgive us, the water wasn't safe." His jaw clenched. They knew. They all knew. A sound echoed from behind them, metal shifting, slow and deliberate. Daniel motioned for silence, drawing his pistol. Lydia froze, her breath shallow. The noise grew louder, a scraping shuffle, like boots against steel. Then a beam of light pierced the darkness ahead. "Cross!" a voice barked, deep, commanding, familiar in tone but aged by bitterness. Daniel's chest tightened. "Cal Morrison," he said quietly. The man emerged from the tunnel's shadow, broad-shouldered, early 40s, wearing a black wool coat dusted with snow and grime. His beard was short, peppered with gray, his eyes dark and sharp with restrained anger. Behind him stood two men, Ryan, wiry and restless, and Dale, heavy-set with a bandaged arm. Each carried a flashlight and a crowbar. Cal raised his hand. "Step back from the box, Agent. You've gone far enough." Daniel lowered the pistol, not in surrender, but in control. "Your father buried a town, Cal. You really came here to bury the truth, too?" Cal's jaw tightened. "You don't understand. That leak destroyed everything we had. My mother, my brothers, they died choking on that poison. And the world blamed us, blamed him. My father wasn't a monster. He tried to fix it." "By silencing everyone else?" Daniel snapped. Cal's eyes glinted in the dim light. "By doing what he had to. You think the government cared about this place? They wanted the land for testing. North Star was just the front." Lydia stepped forward cautiously. "You have proof?" He looked at her camera, then back at Daniel. "The proof's already dead. And if you walk out of here with those files, they'll make sure you are too." For a long moment, only the hum of distant air through the tunnels filled the silence. Daniel lowered his weapon slightly. "You're not here to kill me, Cal. You could have shot already, so what do you want?" Cal hesitated, the muscles in his jaw working. "I want this place to stay buried. You dig up ghosts, you wake pain that never healed." Daniel stepped closer, eyes hard. Pain only festers in silence. Rex's bark echoed faintly through the tunnel from above, sharp and persistent. Lydia turned toward the sound. "He's still fighting to get in." Daniel looked back at Cal. "Seems the dog's got more courage than most men here." Cal's nostrils flared. "Careful." Ryan shifted nervously beside him. "Boss, maybe we just talk, yeah? No one needs to—" But before he could finish, a sudden rumble shook the chamber. The ground trembled, dust rained from the ceiling. Dale stumbled back, shouting, "The structure's collapsing!" Daniel grabbed Lydia's arm. "Move!" They sprinted toward the upward tunnel as metal screamed behind them. The vault cracked open under the stress of years, releasing a hiss of freezing air mixed with chemical stench. Cal shouted something, lost under the thunder of falling debris. They ran blindly through the dark, following the faint upward slope. Lydia coughed, covering her mouth with her scarf. "We can't outrun a cave-in." "Then we make it to daylight first," Daniel growled, pulling her forward. The tunnel narrowed, bending left until a sliver of gray light appeared ahead. He shoved a rusted grate aside and climbed out into the open, snow blinding against the sudden brightness. Lydia crawled out beside him, gasping. Behind them, the tunnel groaned one last time and collapsed inward, sealing the vault in a tomb of ice and steel. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence of the valley had returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt awake, listening. Rex bounded through the snow toward them, tail high, whining anxiously. Daniel knelt, gripping the dog's fur, grounding himself in that living warmth. Lydia wiped soot from her cheek, her voice shaking but firm. "You realize what's down there could expose more than North Star. If Cal's right, the government's involved." Daniel looked back toward the collapsed mound. "Then it's bigger than any of us thought." A crack echoed from the ridge, a single rifle shot. Snow exploded near Daniel's feet. He grabbed Lydia's arm, pulling her down behind a rock. Another shot whistled past. "They're still here," Lydia hissed. Daniel scanned the tree line, eyes narrowing. "They're trying to scare us off. Are you scared?" He smiled grimly. "Not yet." They crawled low, moving along the ridge until the gunfire stopped. When Daniel risked a glance back, the ridge was empty again, just drifting snow and pine. Whoever fired had melted into the forest. Elena's farmhouse smoke was visible in the distance. "We head there," Daniel said. "They'll think we died in the collapse. That buys us time." Lydia adjusted her satchel, the strap frayed from the escape. "You're planning something." He met her eyes, the fire returning beneath the weariness. "You wanted the truth, Lydia? We're going to show it to the world. But first, we find Elena. She deserves to know what we found." They trudged through the snow, the valley stretching endless ahead of them. Behind, the ruins of Black Hollow exhaled steam into the frozen air like a beast stirring from long sleep. And deep beneath the ice, under tons of collapsed steel, something still pulsed faintly. A rhythmic metallic beat, slow but deliberate, as if the valley itself hadn't finished speaking yet. By the time Daniel Cross and Lydia Cole reached Elena Moore's farmhouse, the sun was little more than a pale ghost behind the clouds. The blizzard had softened into a slow, sorrowful fall of snow, flakes drifting like the ashes of a long-dead fire. The house, though worn by decades of neglect, still stood proud against the wind. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, a fragile sign of life in the white silence. Elena opened the door before they could knock. Her face, pale and stern, softened the instant she saw them alive. "You look like hell," she said, voice trembling just enough to betray her relief. "Feels worse," Daniel replied with a weak grin, shaking the snow from his coat. Rex bounded in first, circling the hearth before settling near the fire. Lydia followed, clutching her satchel tight. Inside it, the frozen ledger they had rescued from the vault. Elena poured them coffee, the bitter smell cutting through the cold. "I saw the smoke over the ridge," she said quietly. "Thought maybe—" She didn't finish. Daniel met her gaze. "We found him down there, Cal Morrison, and what's left of North Star's sins." Her hand stilled on the table. "My husband?" Daniel nodded slowly. His name was in the files. He tried to report the leak, but the company intercepted the letter. They called it sabotage, pinned the failure on him. He died protecting people who never even knew. Elena closed her eyes, tears glistening against lashes frosted white. For the first time, her steel composure cracked. "All these years," she whispered, "I thought he was part of it. I hated him for dying a coward. And all along—" Daniel leaned forward. "He was the only one brave enough to tell the truth." Lydia set the ledger on the table, its frozen leather softening in the heat. These records could clear his name and expose everything North Star covered up. Shipments, payouts, falsified safety reports, even payments to state officials. Elena looked up, her grief sharpening into resolve. "Then we show it, all of it." Daniel hesitated. "If we go public, Cal and whoever's behind him won't stop. They've already tried to bury us alive." Lydia unzipped her bag, pulling out her camera. Then we don't give them time. I've got enough footage, enough files, and enough names. By morning, this story will be everywhere. Outside, the wind began to rise again, rattling the window panes. The storm wasn't done. Not yet. That night, as Lydia uploaded her photos through a shaky satellite link, Daniel stood by the window, watching the snow sweep across the valley. He could almost hear the echoes under the ice, the vault breathing its last secrets into the frozen air. Rex sat beside him, chin resting on Daniel's boot, his amber eyes steady and knowing. "You think we did the right thing, boy?" Daniel murmured. The dog blinked, a quiet affirmation in his stillness. Behind him, Elena spoke softly. "My husband once said this land could heal if given the chance. Maybe he was right." Daniel turned toward her. The firelight caught her face, tired, lined but glowing faintly with something close to peace. "What will you do now?" "Stay," she said simply. "Fix the roof, clear the fields, maybe plant again in spring." It's what he would have wanted. Lydia closed her laptop, exhaustion softening her voice. "You'll have visitors soon. Reporters, lawyers, maybe agents. Once this breaks, Black Hollow won't stay forgotten." Elena smiled faintly. Maybe it's time it was remembered for the right reasons. A low rumble broke through the wind. Engines. Headlights cut through the snow from the far ridge. Daniel's hand went instinctively to his sidearm. "They're back." But before he could move, another light flared from the opposite hill, red and blue. Police cruisers. Lydia's broadcast had gone out faster than expected. The cavalry, in its imperfect human way, had come. Hours later, as dawn crept over the mountains, Daniel stood outside watching uniformed officers and environmental investigators descend into the valley. The snow glowed faint pink in the sunrise, the air alive with motion and purpose for the first time in decades. Cal Morrison was led away in handcuffs, silent but strangely calm. When he passed Daniel, he stopped for just a second, meeting his eyes. "Maybe you did the right thing," Cal said quietly, "but it won't bring back the dead." Daniel nodded. "No, but it might let the living breathe again." Cal gave a faint nod, then turned away as the snow began to fall heavier. When the last vehicle disappeared over the ridge, the valley was quiet once more. But this time, it wasn't the silence of death. It was the silence that comes after confession, the breath drawn between endings and beginnings. Elena walked to the edge of her field, kneeling where the snow had thinned. She pressed her palm into the earth, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Lydia stood beside Daniel, camera lowered. "You could leave now," she said softly. "Start over somewhere warm. You've earned that." Daniel smiled faintly, eyes tracing the horizon. "Maybe, but I think I already did." Rex barked once, tail wagging as if in agreement. As the wind carried the sound of distant church bells, restored by rescuers who found them buried beneath debris, the valley seemed to exhale. Smoke rose from chimneys again. The first hammer struck wood. Life, stubborn and simple, began rebuilding what the lies had broken. And for the first time in years, Daniel Cross closed his eyes and heard nothing but the quiet rhythm of peace. Sometimes God doesn't send thunder or angels. He sends a quiet snowstorm, a loyal dog, or a broken man who still chooses to do the right thing when no one is watching. The story of Black Hollow reminds us that miracles don't always arrive as lightning in the sky. Sometimes they come as the courage to face the past, the forgiveness that sets the soul free, and the faith that keeps us building even when everything seems lost. Daniel Cross didn't just uncover a secret, he uncovered the truth that healing begins the moment we stop running from the silence and start listening for God within it. And maybe that's the real miracle, that even in the coldest valleys of our lives, God still whispers, "Get up, try again, the story isn't over." If this story touched your heart, share it. Someone out there might need to be reminded that hope is never buried too deep. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what this story means to you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, healing, and quiet miracles. And may God bless you, protect your home, and remind you every day that you are never truly forgotten.